Mayor Battle, thank you for joining us for Sunday Mornings with the Mayors.
I'm so glad to be here.
This morning we'd like to talk about some economic news that the city's had recently. You were recently in Washington, D.C. to talk about hearings and NASA and the future of that agency. Given the fact that it's tied so closely to the community, what were your thoughts after attending that meeting in Washington?
Very, let's say cautiously optimistic is the way that we are right now. We're seeing a big change in with the president's budget coming out without Constellation in it. NASA still has just as much money this year as it has last year. In fact, it had a 1.5% increase in the budget. And the congressional delegation was asking, why don't we go ahead with Constellation? Why don't we go ahead with our planned space flight? It's been a very good progression that we've done. We've done Space Station. The Space Station has taught us how man can live in space and how they can live for a long term. The next idea was to take a man to the moon, get out of subspace and get into the deep space and take a man to the moon. Go back to the moon and then come back to Earth, and then the ultimate is taking have manned space flight all the way to Mars. The Congress seems to get it. They seem to understand that that's what needs to happen. And yesterday in both Senate and House hearings, Charlie Bolden, the NASA administrator, sat there and said, our number one priority is manned space flight to Mars. So, if we're running parallel paths, I think the whole Congress is asking, why aren't we going straight forward with this? Why aren't we doing what we had planned for and we spent $9 billion to do? Why do we scrap that and then start over with something we call, quote, commercialization? Bart Gordon, head of the Science Technology Committee for the House, sat there and said if commercialization is not cheaper, which it isn't, if it's not faster, which it isn't, if it's not safer for our astronauts, which it isn't, said, why are we even going down this road? And and it's a real good question to ask. Why do we go down this road? Yesterday we had at the Science Technology House Committee meeting, we had 10 Democrat congressmen, 8 Republican congressmen, all who sat through the hearing, and all who had something to say, and every one of them were in favor of Constellation, in favor of putting it back in the budget, in favor of making sure that we don't lose this space race, that we don't make America make America an also-ran in the space race, and making sure that we kept our dominating position in the space race. So I feel cautiously optimistic. This isn't just a Huntsville issue. This is a national issue. It's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It is an issue about America and what America's future is going to be, what our future is going to be in science, technology, and math. It's an issue about that we pulled together the biggest intellectual pool of rocket scientists that the world has ever seen, and the idea that if you go down the path that the administration is suggesting, you're going to lose the best and brightest of those. They're going to bleed off to other industries, and once you lose those, that pool of that intellectual pool, you can't bring it back together. So it's a question about where America is going to go, where our dominance is going to go. Do we have the will to be number one?
Mr. Mayor, you recently appointed a commission entitled Second to None to look into the Constellation situation and its ramifications on the community depending on how it works its way through the budgetary process. How do you see that developing over the course of the next few months as the folks in Washington wrangle with NASA?
I think we've seen a lot of communities across this nation doing the same thing, and there's a lot of parallel paths on what we're trying to do. Our group is 25 people who are in the industry, who are in the space industry, who naturally have an interest in this. We're led by Bud Kramer, our former congressman, who has 18 years of experience in Washington, D.C. and has fought this fight many times. And Bud is doing a very good job of making sure that the issues are in front of the congressional leaders. he's a perfect one to be in the spot because he knows the fight. He knows where he has to go and what he has to do. It's also led by Senator Shelby. Senator Shelby is on the Appropriations Committee. He and Barbara McCluskey work very closely together, and being on appropriations, it really makes a big difference. So Senator Shelby is one of the people that we're going to lean on real strong to make sure that this happens. And and if anybody can do it, Senator Shelby can.
They say you hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Sure.
If Constellation doesn't get the funding that it really needs and it forces some cutbacks at Marshall and other places like that, is the community prepared to respond and deal with that?
I think our community survives, and this whole fight is more not about Huntsville community, not about Huntsville jobs. It's about the will of America and what America needs to do. You look at the budget right now, there's a 1.5% increase in this year's budget as compared to last year's budget. And, and really the mission of NASA does not worry me that much for 1, 2, 3, 4 years out. But, in that 5th year, when you don't have a mission, you're not sending man up into space, bringing them back down. You don't have a focal point about where you're going. That's when it becomes very easy to have budget cuts. I'd say for the immediate future that we're probably okay, but I would say in the long term that no mission for NASA is not a good thing for either. It's not a good thing for Huntsville. It's not a good thing for Goddard. It's not a good thing for Mizzou. It's not a good thing for Houston. And it's not a good thing for the Florida district. So, you look at all of them across the board and all the way up to Ohio and the Glenn Center, every one of them needs to be able to say that there is a mission that NASA is doing and there's a reason to be funding NASA to this degree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure spending Sunday morning with you.